special edition of 2020.
In my dreams, I'd be whole, riding my horse, playing with my family. And then suddenly I wake up, it's 2 in the morning, and I'm lying in bed. And I can't move, and I'm on a ventilator.
The long journey of Christopher Reeve has come to an end. But his inspiring story lives on. The superhero who leaped tall buildings in a single bound became a real-life hero to millions as he wrestled with his broken body, his troubling thoughts.
That you wanted to die, pull the plug, whatever.
You'll admire his family, the children who gave him the will to fight, his loving, devoted wife.
And we made this commitment, and it's still just as strong, if not stronger. And we just look forward and keep going.
Never resting, speaking out, raising awareness and hope for himself and others like him.
54 million Americans are disabled.
Barbra Walters, with a story of fame, misfortune, love, and loss. Christopher Reeve, a tribute to courage.
Good evening, and welcome to a special edition of 2020. Tonight, a tribute to the public and private journey of Christopher Reeve. The 52-year-old actor died yesterday, 9 years after the horseback riding accident that left him paralyzed from the neck down. I had the honor of conducting the first interview with Christopher just 4 months after his fall. His 6'4" body was still, but his mind and spirit soared. Since then, he has been an inspiration not just to those afflicted as he was, but to all of us. ABC has been following his journey from the beginning. His death was a shock to most people. What exactly did Christopher Reeve die of? Dr. Timothy Johnson joins us from Boston. Tim, what happened?
As far as we know, he had a cardiac arrest leading to heart failure. In other words, his heart gave out. Exactly what led to that, we're not sure. Apparently, he had some massive infections from bed sores. We also know that people with spinal cord injuries of the type he had have nervous systems that do not function correctly, and all kinds of stimuli can set them off and lead to heart rhythm problems and high blood pressure. So some kind of heart event led to his death.
You know, he seemed to be doing so well. In fact, just last week, Christopher was making a speech in Chicago. He didn't seem fragile, but people who knew him, like myself, knew that he'd had so many problems over the years.
You're right. Those of us who only saw him fleetingly in his public appearances could get the misimpression that he was a healthy person. In fact, with spinal cord injury, there are all kinds of chronic problems, and it doesn't take much to set off that cascade toward the final event, in his case, a heart attack and heart failure.
But he did do so much, so many exercises. He made so much progress. That's not typical, though, is it?
Well, he had resources that many people do not have, and he did make some progress, but of course his great contribution was the progress that has come about from research because of his impetus and his interest and his motivation.
Thank you, Tim. Most medical experts agree that if a patient doesn't feel any movement within the first 6 months after being paralyzed, the possibility of progress is remote. Christopher Reeve refused to accept that. Since that Saturday in May of 1995, he has fought profound physical and emotional battles, starting with his first difficult decision, to live. Christopher and I talked about this at the Kessler Rehabilitation Institute in New Jersey, where he gave me that first interview after the accident.
There are those moments when I go, man, how'd this happen? I mean, how can this be my life? I've not been able to eat, wash, go to the bathroom, or get dressed by myself. Now, some people are able to accept living with a severe disability. I am not one of them.
For 9 years, Christopher Reeve fought a heroic struggle to bring his body back to life. In 1995, in a split second, the actor who portrayed the Man of Steel was rendered a quadriplegic, unable to move or breathe on his own. 4 months after his tragic fall, I did the first interview with him and found a man whose body was paralyzed, but whose mind and spirit soared. And you think you will walk again?
I think it's very possible I'll walk again.
And if you don't?
Then I won't walk again.
As simple as that.
Either you do or you don't. See, it's like a game of cards. Then you just play the hand you're dealt. Sometimes you get a lot of face cards, sometimes you don't. But I think the game's worthwhile, I really do.
In the first days following the accident, there was little hope and thoughts of suicide. It was his family that made the difference.
It was when the children walked in the room.
And I could see how much they needed me and wanted me. What happens to me when I have a problem is I get embarrassed. I go like, oh, I don't want to cause you people trouble. And I don't want people to have to be burdened to take care of me, you know? That was my thought briefly on that afternoon. And then the minute they all came in and I could see the love and feel the love and know that we're still a family and that we're great. And how lucky we all are, and that my brain is on straight. The thought vanished and has never come back again.
Oh, wow. Wait a minute. In that first interview, Reeve took us inside his dreams, where he was no longer confined, but free.
In my dreams, I'd be whole. Riding my horse, playing with my family. You know, we have a beautiful boat that Dana and I worked on together and built together. We'd be making love, we'd be doing everything. And then suddenly I wake up, it's 2 in the morning and I'm lying in bed. And I can't move and I'm on a ventilator.
In the years that followed, Reeve vowed to walk again and champion research for spinal cord injuries. Doctors said he would not only be unable to walk, he wouldn't be able to move. But with intense physical therapy, Reeve defied the odds. Over the years, his appearance changed. He lost his hair. But more important, he regained some sensation in his body and some movement in his fingers, wrists, and legs, as I discovered in this interview with him in September of 2002. Now, on your own command, from your brain to your fingers, can you now, as you sit and talk to me, move your fingers?
Sure.
Let me see.
So there's a
Chris.
little fast one.
Chris, I mean,
So,
I'm amazed.
It's just little, you know.
Can you move the others or just that one?
Well, when it's placed on the armrest, just that one. But when they're free or in the pool, I can move all of them.
We're going to sway a little bit, loosen you up, okay?
It's nice.
In water, where there is less gravity, Reeve told us he willed his legs to move. When aides positioned his feet, his muscles could even move in a walking motion.
Oh, my God.
But there was another surprise that day. Also, you now can feel touch where you couldn't feel touch before?
My sensory feeling is about 68 to 70% of normal. Then when I was first injured, it was 12% of normal.
So if Dana gives you a hug or Will gives you a hug, you can feel it now?
Absolutely, yeah.
And you couldn't before?
No.
What has this meant to you emotionally?
It's tremendous. I mean, it's really tremendous for a number of reasons. Because touch is so important, particularly with children, particularly loved ones.
I wasn't going to do this, but when I see you now, I do what I always do. I come over and I touch your face. Sometimes I kiss you. If I do this, you feel it?
Absolutely.
You feel my hand? You never felt my hand. I'm astounded.
Well, things move on, thankfully.
Then in our last interview, in November of 2003, Reeve took another bold step. When his ventilator was turned off, and with the help of a special pacemaker, he was finally able to breathe on his own. I have never talked to you without
I've
the
never done
ventilator.
this in public. This is the first time. And we'll just listen for a minute to the quiet. See, back to normal, and I can talk.
I don't know what to say. All these interviews you and I have done, and now you are breathing on your own. There was silence, and another simple pleasure most of us take for granted. You've not been able to smell all these years.
Right, not for 8 years. Coffee. Coffee, very good.
I have a rose. You've not been able to smell this before.
No.
Let's see.
Yes, it was beautiful.
You know, many of us in the morning feel, oh, I don't want to get out of bed, I don't want to face the day. You know. What do you say to yourself when you feel that way?
Being physically paralyzed for 8 years, I get pretty impatient with people who are able-bodied, but are somehow paralyzed for other reasons. You know, all the reasons people don't become what they could become or don't fulfill their potential, and they're walking around able-bodied. I'm going, come on, go for it.
And Christopher Reeve really did go for it to the end.
When 2020 returns, it was a teenage boy's dream that became a reality. Christopher Reeve, building a dream one role at a time, until the superhero became a hero of a different kind. Next.
He will always be remembered as Superman. But for Christopher Reeve, the greatest role of his life would be his last one. A man struggling against all odds to walk again and to give hope to others like himself. As Barbra reports, it was not a role he had trained for, and it was certainly not part of Christopher Reeve's dream.
Reeve said that he decided to become an actor at the age of 13, and he quickly began to grasp every opportunity to learn his profession, spending his high school vacations in summer stock and eventually coming here to study at New York's Juilliard School of Drama under the famed actor and teacher John Houseman. One of his friends and classmates was Robin Williams. Reeve went as broadly and deeply into acting as he could. He worked off-Broadway for the respected Circle Repertory Company, and he played a sleazy character on the soap opera Love of Life. And he forever remembered the advice he got from Katharine Hepburn when he played her grandson in a Broadway play. "Now, be fascinating, Christopher," she said to him. "Be fascinating."
Did he achieve that?
You know, he did. He was very serious about acting, but he was not at his best as a serious actor. His problem was, and he knew it, he was so good looking that it seemed to limit the kinds of roles he could play. So he played against that and kind of made fun of it.
He got the part with which he would always be identified when he was still in his mid-20s. After actors such as Robert Redford and Warren Beatty were considered for the part, Reeve, who went through an intensive training regimen because director Richard Donner thought he was too skinny, got $250,000 to be Superman. One of the qualities Reeve brought to the part was that he played it straight, not as camp.
He was a great Clark Kent. And he was playing in Superman, he got to play the hero and the funny sidekick. And in many ways, he was better as the funny sidekick. Who wouldn't recognize the 6'4" guy with all those muscles as Superman and Clark Kent? But he managed to get the audience to want to believe that he was Clark Kent.
A special coin compartment for emergency.
In 1980, he made Somewhere in Time, a romance about two lovers who conquer time to be together. Reeve recalled, in his words, it bombed so badly it left a crater in the basement. But the growing video market exposed it to a wider audience, and within a few years, it had achieved a kind of cult popularity that it still retains. But he was serious when he said he wanted to develop as an actor and avoid typecasting. He played a gay amputee in the Lanford Wilson play 5th of July. He took a role as a crazed playwright opposite Michael Caine in the mystery Death Trap.
I mean, I'm really honored and staggered that Sidney Brule.
And despite being cautioned not to work with independent filmmakers for a lower salary than he could command, he made a film adaptation of a Henry James novel called The Bostonians. "I was warned I'd be putting one foot in the grave of my career," he said.
This was when he was like at the peak of his Hollywood career, and Hollywood actors didn't do that. If you're a Hollywood actor and you want to get bigger and bigger and bigger, it's a lose-lose. You do a little tiny movie, if it does well, so what? And if it doesn't do well, so what? But to the craft, and to who he was. He took his craft very, very seriously.
And after the riding accident that paralyzed him, he still found ways to work in the craft that meant so much to him.
Cut it. Yes, 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 yes.
Reeve pursued what some began to call a second career by directing an HBO drama, In the Gloaming, about a family torn apart by AIDS. In 1998, he again played a leading role, this time in the television film Rear Window, a remake of the Hitchcock classic that starred James Stewart, about a man who is incapacitated and witnesses a murder through his window. Reeve incorporated details from his own life, such as when ventilator tubes slip and cut off oxygen.
He was very good, and he really made the part work, and he made the film work, and he added a dimension that Jimmy Stewart couldn't have, because we knew that this was real.
His last project was as executive producer and director of a program for the Arts and Entertainment Network, The Brooke Ellison Story.
Good afternoon.
About a young woman who was paralyzed from the neck down at the age of 11 and went on to become a Harvard graduate. Its air date was originally scheduled for 2 weeks from tonight.
It would be great if this film would cause families everywhere to think about how they're really doing in their family. And a loving, functional family will pull together and get through it.
But the most important role Christopher Reeve ever played was undoubtedly himself, a man who believed nothing was impossible, that he would someday walk again. That was captured in a film documentary called Christopher Reeve, Courageous Steps, directed by Reeve's son, Matthew. These extraordinary images will also last, just like the ones the movies created. Just like a quote once attributed to Reeve, which could describe both the approach he took to his career and his recovery. He said, "Either you decide to stay in the shallow end of the pool, or you go out in the ocean."
And so he did. When we come back, we'll be joined by 3 celebrated actors who are also friends of Christopher Reeve, and they're going to share some of their private moments and memories of him. Christopher Reeve leaves behind an impressive legacy as a man, as an actor, and as an activist. Tonight, some of his friends and colleagues are with us to talk about the man they knew, and we appreciate their being on with us tonight. Glenn Close starred in the made-for-TV movie In the Gloaming, which Christopher Reeve directed. It was his first job after his accident. But before we talk about In the Gloaming, Glenn, you were with Dana Reeve today. You're a very good friend of the family. Can you tell us what she said?
Well, we live in a great community, and when things like this happen, the community rallies around, and everybody was, who were friends and neighbors, were bringing food and just having an active presence to be there with them. And went down the hall with Dana, and she said, it's so true now for Chris, free at last, thank God he's free at last. And then she mentioned the wind, because he loved that boat so much, and how they would sail in all kinds of weather. Even if it was freezing cold and a great wind would come up, he'd go to the boat and get on the water. And she was thinking that today we had that wind, and somehow it was a tribute to Chris. His spirit is with us.
Glenn, when you worked with him in The Gloaming, he was paralyzed, but he was your director. What was it like? What was that experience like?
I was a little nervous because it was not long after he came out of rehab that he did that movie, and I know that there was a lot of speculation as to whether he could physically pull it off. But from the first moment that we all sat around the table and read the script together, and he had great authority about the text. He had worked on what was originally a very literary short story and helped develop it into this story that had great emotional impact. He was phenomenal. Mm-hmm. And it was wonderful working with him. He had great instincts as a director, and the only thing he said was how frustrating it was not to be able to stride on the set and show us something, physically.
And it was a great success, I remember. We'll come back for another question. But Jane Seymour is also here. And Jane, you were both young actors, you and Christopher Reeve, when you worked in the movie Somewhere in Time. And we've already said that it became a cult classic, even though it wasn't in the beginning a big success. But your relationship continued after that. Tell us about it.
Well, we developed a really special, really close relationship while we were making that film. And something really magical happened. And, you know, of all the people that I've ever worked with, he always remained a really, really close friend. And we kept in contact right until just a couple of months ago. We really shared ups and downs. We shared so much. I always remember him calling me and telling me he'd met Dana and how amazing she was. And you know, our families were together. I even, we called our son, one of our twins, Christopher, after Chris Reeve, and he became his godfather. And, you know, Chris would talk to me all the time about how people are paralyzed in life, you know, and he was supposedly paralyzed, but not paralyzed in his mind or his spirit. And he was really an inspiration to me and, you know, obviously millions of others.
I wonder, Jane, how your son, who is what, 9 years old now? How did he take the news?
Yes, he's almost 9.
Yeah. How did he take the news?
Oh, he was weeping. He was in my bed this morning and he wouldn't leave. And you know, he has a twin, Johnny, who was named after Johnny Cash, and the two of them came to me and said, "Mommy, why do our godfathers, why did they all die this year? You know, how does this happen?" And but, you know, we have beautiful memories of Chris, and my Chris really emulates him. You know, he's fearless, he's strong, he's big, he's, you know,
very much like his godfather.
Man.
Very much. One happy memory. You went to a Crosby, Stills, and Nash concert.
Well, you know, after he was in the chair, you know, you just don't know quite how to deal with it. And I was at this fundraiser, and he was there, and everyone was standing up and dancing to Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, and I could see he was just dying to dance. And Dana, I don't think she was there that day, and my husband, James, was there, and I said, "James, is it okay if I dance with Chris?" And he went, "What do you mean?" And I looked at Chris, and he said, "Okay," and I put my cheek next to his cheek, and we, like, rocked out, and everyone was looking at us, and he was laughing, and I remember that he was still able to have fun, have a wicked sense of humor, and party, even though at that time absolutely nothing moved. Amazing.
Thank you, Jane. Stay with us if we have time for another question. In 1989, Christopher Reeve became one of the founding members of the Creative Coalition, a social and political advocacy group made up of people in the entertainment industry, and one of its co-founders was actor Alec Baldwin, who joins me now. Alec, was Christopher active in name only?
Chris was one of the people, along with Ron Silver and Blair Brown, among others, and Steve Collins, who founded Creative Coalition in the late 1980s. But Chris became one of the most emblematic parts of that organization. I remember we went to Washington to lobby for federal arts funding from the Congress, and wherever Chris went, the celebrity advocacy thing played the brightest, because all of us went to go speak to these senators and these congressmen, but none of them got the response that Chris got because of all the, you know, really famous films he'd made. And then in 96, when he had his injury, literally less than a month before he was injured, I was standing with him at a meeting, and in the way that Schwarzenegger is the governor now of California, I really had this sense that Chris had become so politically astute that I really felt that, you know, one day Chris would probably run for public office and in all likelihood win.
And this was before the accident, so his commitment was not something that just happened after his injury.
No, Chris was very engaged politically. Once Creative Coalition was formed in the late 80s, and again, he was someone who, in terms of affecting legislation and affecting public policy, he'd become so skillful. The work we did in Washington in the 1990s, some of us were a lot more aggressive and a lot more kind of belligerent about arts funding than we might have needed to be. And Chris was the one who coached us all to kind of be a little more conciliatory. And I could see right away that Chris was someone who, I really believe in my heart, when I stood next to him at this meeting one day, that Chris had a very bright future in elective politics ahead of him.
What will you miss the most about him?
Chris was very serious about whatever he did. I mean, you know, the thing I always think about Chris, I think of the Williamstown Theater Festival. I went to their 50th anniversary celebration in September of this year, and Chris was a big part of Williamstown. They were hoping he was going to make it up there this year, and he couldn't for whatever reasons. I saw Chris just about a month ago at the U.S. Open. I saw him in New York. He came to the Open one day to the tennis match. But I had gone to the theater festival, and Chris was such a serious stage actor. He was so committed to the theater, which is a great passion of mine.
Yeah.
And he was a big, big part of the alumni of the theater festival up in Williamstown, Massachusetts.
He was such a big part not only of your life and the theater community, but all our lives. And I thank you. I thank all three of you for being on with us and sharing your private thoughts. We appreciate it. We'll be back.
When 2020 returns, he believed he would walk again with the help of a breakthrough medical advance. Christopher Reeve at the center of a battle that isn't over yet. Next. This special edition of 2020 continues. Again, Barbara Walters.
I saw Christopher Reeve get angry only once. It was when he was talking about the battle raging over stem cell research. Christopher believed this research was a key to reversing paralysis and curing other life-threatening illnesses. He was on the front lines until the end. Here is Lynn Shure.
Stem cell research is such a hot topic, it came up at the presidential debate last week with a nod to the man who led the crusade.
Chris Reeve is a friend of mine. Chris Reeve exercises every single day to keep those muscles alive for the day when he believes he can walk again, and I want him to walk again. I think we can save lives. Now, I think we can do ethically guided embryonic stem cell research.
But President Bush opposes the use of human embryos to provide those stem cells.
Science is important, but so's ethics. So's balancing life. To destroy life, to save life is one of the real ethical dilemmas that we face.
Senator Kerry today revealed that the actor later telephoned to thank him for acknowledging his work.
The excitement in his voice was just really palpable. And he was so thrilled about where the discussion of stem cell research had come to.
But stem cell research has become a constant contentious campaign issue, bringing out the stars.
Stem cell research could help millions of Americans whose lives have been touched by devastating illnesses.
And creating the strangest of bedfellows in this political season, arguing that it might help stave off the Alzheimer's that claimed the life of former President Ronald Reagan. Both his widow and his son have spoken out in support.
I just don't see how we can turn our backs on this. There are so many diseases that can be cured or at least helped. We've lost so much time already, and I just really can't bear to lose any more.
Ron Reagan even addressed the Democratic convention, insisting it was not a partisan issue, but one for all human beings.
Whatever else you do, come November 2nd, I urge you, please, cast a vote for embryonic stem cell research. Thank you for your time.
I appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
None of this might have come up without the determination of Christopher Reeve.
While we prolong the stem cell debate, millions continue to suffer. It is time to harness the power of government and go forward.
Here's what he's talking about. Stem cells with the most promise are found in week-old human embryos. And when they are harvested, then cultured, they have the remarkable ability to develop into cells for any part of the body. Muscles, skin, nerves, you name it.
It's one of the most exciting ventures in my scientific lifetime. They have the possibility of replacing lost parts. It comes close to thinking about curing or halting a disease process.
Dr. Gerald Fishback, Dean of Columbia University Medical Center, has helped drive the debate on stem cell research. A personal friend of Chris Reeve, he understands the role the actor played in bringing the subject to light. When the history of stem cell research is written, what will that history say about Christopher Reeve?
I think it will say that he was one of the first and the most steadfast advocates and the most informed, and that he had an enormous influence on the public and on Congress. I can't think of anyone who's been more powerful as an advocate than Christopher Reeve.
And as he told Barbara Walters, he believed that making stem cell research a political issue had delayed his own recovery.
I think President Bush made a political decision that was influenced by social and religious conservatives. And I feel that no religion should have a seat at the table in this discussion.
If they had the proper stem cell research, you might very well be standing?
Yeah.
You feel that, Chris?
Yeah, well, I feel it, and also scientists have said that to me.
Today, American labs are engaged in a wide variety of basic research, mostly with animal, not human cells, to determine the promise of human stem cell research on Parkinson's disease, epilepsy, diabetes, leukemia, and Alzheimer's, to name just a few. Scientists say this country is leading the work, but that the controversy over federal funding may mean the next critical steps will be taken overseas, in Israel, Asia, Australia, Scandinavia, and England. Wherever it happens, it will be Chris Reeve's legacy. Not just his films, not just his courage, but his dream and resolve to make a better life for the rest of us.
What I would like to say to anybody who's an opponent of the best available research, just to spend 1 hour in a wheelchair, 1 hour without moving, and that means no scratching your nose, not being able to move a thing. Just try it for 1 hour and then see how you feel.
Joining me now is Michael Manganello. He's a longtime friend of Christopher and his family, and he's now the chief lobbyist for the Christopher Reeve Paralysis Foundation, which is pushing a bill in Congress to increase funding for spinal cord research. Thank you for being with us, Michael. I know how close you are to the family, and our deepest sympathy to you and to the family. You were with the family today. Was this a surprise? Was it a shock as it was to us, his death?
You know, Barbara, I think despite the fact that, of course, we all knew that Chris was a ventilated quadriplegic and that the maladies that affect quadriplegics could affect Chris at any time, I think that over the years we began to think that he was indomitable. And so for those reasons, despite the fact that Chris had had a fairly rough 6 months physically, we just thought he would be able to overcome it and to move forward. And we were shocked that it happened so quickly.
Where is that bill now in Congress?
Barbara, the Christopher Reeve Paralysis Act had the opportunity today, a piece of it, to pass in the Senate. It passed in the House 418 to 0 last week. I'm sorry to say that there's been a hold put on the bill in the Senate. We're not sure who's put the hold on the bill, but the hold is because certain senators feel that Chris is just too outspoken with regard to the stem cell issue. It's very disappointing because it would have been a great tribute to Chris to have this bill passed.
Well, I'm sure that you and the family and millions of others hope that it will be part of his legacy. Thank you, Michael. We appreciate your being on with us.
Thank you for this tribute, Barbara.
When we continue, we will turn from science to love.
When 2020 returns, Christopher and Dana Reeve, they vowed to be together in sickness and health. How did their marriage survive the test?
I look at other couples laughing, or someone, you know, a husband sort of flipping his wife's hair, and I think like, oh, I miss that stuff. I miss the little things like that.
Next.
In the future, when the story of Christopher Reeve's life is told, it won't be a tragedy, because above all else, this is a love story between a man and a woman, between Christopher and Dana Reeve.
You know, when Dana and I got married, I really felt that, you know, things are on the right track. You know, life was stable.
Dana and Chris first met when they were both performing in regional theater. 25-year-old Dana Morosini was singing at a late-night cabaret. Reeve was in the audience, and he says he couldn't take his eyes off of her.
It was intense attraction at first sight.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was intense.
Which developed very quickly into love.
They married in 1992 when Dana was 7 months pregnant with their son, Will. You were married for what, 3 years before the accident?
Yes.
Things going well?
Right? Oh, yeah. Oh, it's...
Chris actually used to say every day for the first year or so that we were married, every day he would say, gosh, I love being married. I love being
This is actually a good deal. I can't believe it.
Yeah, we should have done this before.
What did you learn from Dana?
Oh, my God. There's that commitment, true commitment. True commitment transforms you. You really know where you stand.
I look at you holding your husband's hand.
Yeah, I know.
You don't feel that?
You can't feel
No, I can't feel it. No.
No, but that is, you're talking about some of the toughest parts. That is tough because I can feel him, but he can't feel me. Except up here, I spend a lot of time touching him here and touching his face, and all of that is sensitive.
Yeah.
But it's, I mean, and not being able to get hugged back and stuff, that's hard.
Yeah. When I first was coming out of, consciousness, and you have the thought, maybe it's not worth everybody's trouble. And I had that thought for maybe 10 minutes.
That you wanted to die, pull the plug, whatever.
Yeah, I suggested maybe I should just check out. And then Dana said to me, but you're still you, and I love you.
When it's actually the person you love, the person you know, and there's no head injury, no brain damage, it's him, it's the essence of him, and that's what I said to him, is that it's you. I also said, though, of course, that it was his decision, but that I would be there for the long run, no matter what. It's incredible.
I really pushed the marriage vows to the limit. In sickness and in health, this wasn't what we had in mind.
When we talked the first time, it was obvious that you two were just so close and loving, but a lot happens in 3 years.
Right. Dana and I, we've been together 11 years now, and we're just, solid as a rock going in, and that just continues. Dana gave up all of 1995 to take care of me, and a lot of 96, so that once I came home, got busy, directing a movie and writing a book, and then I felt my job was to give her her time back, so she could go to work without feeling guilty, about me or about Will. It's her turn.
And when Dana takes her turn on stage, Chris turns into a starstruck fan. She often does cabaret. She's recently appeared in an off-Broadway play. And she was one of the show-stopping moments in the ABC special, A Celebration of Hope, which was a benefit for spinal cord research.
And his is the only music that makes me dance.
How do you find time for your own career?
Well, I'm lucky in that Chris gives me time, because if you give and give and give and only live through other people, you're no good to anyone.
Do you ever get adjusted to this?
We do adjust, because what are the alternatives? It would be miserable not to. But do we long for our other life? Yes, every day. It's a drastic change.
What's the toughest part?
It's hard to see other people do what we used to do, even hold hands. Even, I look at other couples laughing, or someone, a husband sort of flipping his wife's hair, and I think oh, I miss that stuff. I miss the little things like that.
Now I'm a pious woman, always trying to be good. But honey, it ain't easy when your husband is a stud.
Chris, you have said very frankly that the most difficult thing in your marriage is the lack of physical intimacy. How do you two deal with that?
Let's put it this way, we're not getting divorced.
But I think also we are, we're as physical with each other as we can be, and we're as close as we can be. As you notice, I don't know many couples who've been together for 15 years who do sit hand in hand, or who, we kiss all the time,
I've seen couples married this long and really don't even touch each other.
Do you share a bedroom?
Oh, yeah.
And a bed.
And a bed.
And a bed. I'm going to ask you something that's very delicate, and you don't have to answer it, but you're used to me by now, right? Does intimacy replace sex?
Well, we have sex too. So we get a little bit of
This is
both.
more than you get to know about.
It's different, but it's
Terrific.
but it's good. Yeah.
How would you describe your relationship?
Very, very strong. I demand a lot out of this relationship. I always have. And I don't expect him to be able to hold a door for me or something like that, and I don't get mad that he can't, because that's unreasonable. That's obviously not in the realm of possibility. But in terms of being an attentive husband and a good father and doing his share as much as he can, I absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That hasn't changed at all.
Dana Reeve put much of her acting and singing career on hold to care for her husband, but recently she's made plans to appear on Broadway beginning in January. In a moment, my own final thoughts. This past September 25th, Christopher Reeve turned 52. He and I shared the same birthday. In many years, we spent our birthdays together, but together or apart, we always felt a kinship. Christopher had hoped to be walking by the time he was 50. It didn't happen. But somewhere in his soul and spirit, I'm sure that Christopher is again walking straight and tall. Our hearts go out to Dana and to the 3 Reeve children, Will and Matthew and Alexander. Goodbye, Christopher, dear friend. This is Barbara Walters for ABC News.